Lots of people praise The Incredibles for being more mature and darker than your average kids film, and I agree, but after rewatching it as an adult, I realized something uncomfortable. A lot of this movie wasn't just mature, it was adult, and it dealt with a lot of themes and concepts that were either too dark for kids to process, too complex for them to understand, and sometimes both. So in this video, I'll be talking about those themes to show you just how adult The Incredibles really is. So without wasting time, let's get into it. The first thing is suicide. This is so heavy a topic that I can't believe it was even in a PG movie. When I watched the scene where the guy jumps off, as a kid I thought, why would anyone do that? But I just brushed it off as him being crazy or something, because as a kid I simply couldn't understand it, but I shouldn't have had to or even try to think that far. Its supposed target audience doesn't possess that level of understanding, so that should tell you who the real target audience is. What makes it worse is that he actually sues Mr. Incredible for apparently ruining his death, and I began to think he was actually mentally unwell and saw death as something to achieve, but it really shows us the type of shit that goes on in this universe. Next is politics and systemic violence. Just the fact that kids are supposed to know how lawsuits and government policy and expenditure work just to understand why supers got banned is crazy. And like I pointed out in my previous Incredibles video, the government just lets crime happen after the superhero ban with no superhero alternative. Like they actually say the Incredibles should have left the Underminer to rob the bank since they had it insured. But what about the lives of all the people put in danger? Let me guess, insure them as well. Point is, people die in this universe and no one seems to care. And one scene that people overlook was when a guy gets mugged and no one does anything about it. And like, a mugging in a kids movie is diabolical, but that's the norm or else you get in trouble. That's the system that's put in place. Banning superheroes send a message beyond supers. When people are in danger, just allow it happen. That's the message. It straight up allows crime to prosper. But for some reason, they never point out in the movie that supervillains would have been wreaking havoc all over due to the ban. So let me just be the one to say that's exactly what would have happened. Next is the moral ambiguity. This directly leads to the systemic issues. Characters like Ellen and Lucius have actually given up on helping people just because it's right and actually want permission before helping. The banning of superheroes really messed up their morale to that point. And back to the same scene with the mugging. Bob's boss was actually so cynical that he completely disregarded the act that was happening. Like, that was so messed up, and you could say yeah, he's probably a horrible guy, but given how other people act in this universe, I think moral detachment was the norm. And there were other scenes that makes you question what kind of superheroes exist in this world, because from my observation, supers won't hesitate to kill if they have to. Like, Mr. Incredible has tried to kill Syndrome in self-defense 2 times, and he succeeded the second time. I mean, that one wasn't even self-defense, it was just for the love of the game. Same with Elastigirl shoving a bunch of bodies into a locker so casually. None of these things are wrong, but they were a bit grounded for a kid audience. Next is the midlife crisis. Bob is like straight up depressed in this movie. He's old, out of shape, he hates his life and he hates his job. He misses the glory days and he's trying to recreate that by stopping petty crime, and his nostalgia for the glory days leads him to lie to his wife. And as I'm saying this, it begins to sound less like a kids movie, doesn't it? And there's often scenes alluding to how Bob and Helen are out of shape, and they're innocent scenes but they're more adult aimed. Sexual undertone. Here things were a bit more careful, but they still persisted. There was a lot of inferred romantic and sexual tension between Bob and Helen, and why not, they're coupled. But they seriously wanted us to know that they were smashing when Bob was getting his life back on track. And there's this scene where, I kid you not, Bob smacks Ellen's ass out of random horniness, and she does so back. But I just found it weird when I watched it as a kid. Like, what were they doing? It's not as bad as the undertones and stuff like Shrek, but still not kid friendly. And of course, Mirage was kind of like this seductive, slender, younger woman who Ellen thinks Bob is cheating on her with. And it's pretty much set up like that. Like, they made it an obvious misunderstanding cliche. Even Helen accuses him of being unfaithful, and yeah, what do you want me to say? That's very adult. Language and tone. Now, there are subtleties in the way people talk and act that makes you realize that these guys weren't playing around, especially on rewatch. Like, what set the tone for me personally was Bon Voyage planting a freaking bomb onto a child. Like, as a kid, when I first saw him, I didn't think much, but I instantly feared him after that act. And he even had a smile on his face. That should give you an idea of the type of villains in this universe. Lucius straight up admits that what they were doing was sad, which in all honesty it was. Also, knowing that those superheroes who got killed were likely friends or co-workers with Mr. Incredible, and he just has to accept that they're dead, that's pretty messed up. Also, Helen giving the kids a pep talk about death. I mean, her explaining that the bad guys will not spare them because they're children, and establishing that they generic kids in this universe. Suicide happens, homicides happen, espionage, a freaking champagne bottle, and I'm being very serious, that should not typically be there. It's not just that these things aren't suitable for children, but that kids can't get the full Incredibles experience because a lot of what happens is above their cognitive ability. And then there's death. This is the biggest separator because all the other things we can argue were subtle, but death was explicit. I remember watching the Geyser Beam scene as a kid and being genuinely saddened. Like, it was like Mr. Incredible's wedding. And with full realization, Brother died in the cave alone and has been there so long that his bones were all that remain. And this is a real consequence that applies to all superheroes. You could always just die on the job and be another story. Geyser Beam exposes the password, and this man was just counting on the fact that someone would make it to the exact cave and find it. It's quite depressing actually. So when Bob accesses the computer, he sees more and more superheroes who were killed just like that, and this scene was more messed up than it presents itself. It makes you wonder just how evil Syndrome really was. He lured all these people out of hiding and began coordinated mass killing. Like, I cannot possibly be overreacting when I say, how did they get away with this? And just because they use words like terminated doesn't make it any less dark. And then Syndrome dies to a jet turbine, which is a nice callback to the Capes theme with Edna. You know, the scene where they do a comedic montage of all the heroes getting killed. Anyway, that's how Syndrome dies, and no one ever mentions it again. And it was still uncomfortable despite the fact that he was a bad guy. And I remember rewatching it as a kid, and I kind of feel bad for Kid Syndrome because yeah, he was kind of annoying, but he didn't deserve to end up like that. The message, and then the hidden message. It's not a dark one, but it's certainly a mature one, and one that kids will not pick up on. The message is basically exceptionalism, that some people are better and more capable than others, and that those people should be allowed freedom to be themselves regardless of how it makes everyone else feel, and those people should use their advantages for good. I know, crazy, but I actually respect it. Not necessarily because I agree, and just to say I don't disagree either, but because most hidden messages in kids movies are usually about accepting yourself or loving everyone, but this is a mature and almost controversial message. Now, I love The Incredibles, and it's great to rewatch as you're older, but my first criticism is that they went too far. I can understand darker themes in kids movies so as not to completely infantilize kids, like Puss in Boots, where they explore fear in a way that kids can actually understand and learn from. The Incredibles is a bit more bare bones and almost cynical. It doesn't handhold the younger audiences through these concepts. They just go for it, and it's so much that it makes me think they weren't even thinking about the kids as much, but more about impressing adults who already expected that level of resonance from Pixar. And my second criticism is that it wasn't really made for kids, and the fact that most children below 13 cannot understand a lot of what goes on in this movie and actually enjoy it enough. The enjoyment is more for people who understand these concepts, and so the target audience begins to shift from kids to adults in a way that kids can still be entertained. And I also want to talk about the adult audience a bit, not just for The Incredibles, but for 3D family animated movies in general. We need to stop projecting our expectations onto kids movies. A popular complaint about Incredibles 2 was that it wasn't as dark as Incredibles 1, but I think that's a bit self-centered because that's not a bad thing. Most of the people saying that are people who grew up with The Incredibles and are now adults who still want the same level of maturity when times have drastically changed, and it's not fair to who these movies are primarily targeted at. I understand wanting good storytelling in PG films because that's not too much to ask, but there is no reason grown adults should be crashing out over it. Like, I grew up with Despicable Me and Kung Fu Panda 2, so seeing the part 4s of each of these movies was actually disappointing, but it's not about me anymore. There's a good amount of adult animation that we can actually focus on. Like, I recently heard people complain about the Lilo and Stitch movie, saying it only made $1 billion because of kids and that kids have bad taste. Like, seriously, kids enjoying content aimed towards them is now a bad thing. It's good to love and cherish classics, but our emotional attachment shouldn't stop us from realizing that it's not about us anymore. So yeah, thanks for watching this, and show the like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.